So I'm absolutely on the page, but
Do you believe that accountants make good finance people?
I think accountants.
I think
accountants. Accountants have the base, but I think it's more than that, right? Yeah. I think it's exposure, and I will say something in the profession. Yeah. We're not as good as our colleagues are in the other functions at doing the succession planning and at creating the opportunities. So I think we have the best base of potential to work with, but I think the reality of today is that the way we create opportunities for the CFOs, we don't do enough of it. And that given the vision of the future and the need for this wide experience, we aren't doing enough to really build the CFOs of the future, and there is a gap. Yeah, okay. That's the bottom line.
Do you think industry knowledge is crucial for CFO to function efficiently in the business that he's in?
No, I'm actually on the same page as Miguel. Yeah. And I've crossed industries as well, from consumer products with Unilever to banking and finance. And I mean, the strength that it brought to the table for me was it brought a different way of looking at things, which was insightful, and it developed its own insight. So I think that the skill set is transferable, and that's a critical element of it. It brings its own value. Personality plays a critical role in all of this, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if someone sits down there and they believe they already know, they're not going to learn. And if you're in a position where you think you know, you probably don't, because things are changing so rapidly. I want to reinforce a point that was made earlier, because I think it is critical, right? The traditional way we do finance and accounting is inwardly focused. It's looking at, last week, like you said, lagging indicators. It's very inwardly focused at a set of books, and the vision has to be wider. It's leading indicators. How is it going to the future? What's the future look like? And the other comment I call context. We're doing this, and it's in the context of what's happening with the regulation in the industry. It's in the context of what our competitors are doing. Because that's what brings insight, right? You bring context to the numbers.
I want to just kind of beg to differ, and that's a last comment there. Yes, accounting, and I think Miguel said it right, accounting keeps you sometimes looking in the past, finance keeps you looking in the future. So that's sort of, finance doesn't, you don't look in the past with finance. You look in the future with finance. Sure. But that's coming across here, Ian. When we look at, and Gregory said, the CFO of the future have to pursue this cost agenda. And all of a sudden something jumped out at me about budgeting. Is budgeting a stifle of innovation?
Okay, yes and no.
Yeah.
Yes, in the sense that most budgets are built on what we did last year and adjust. And that's typically because unless you have a really, I would say, engaged staff, and an engaged staff meaning that you're fully aware of the decisions and strategies that the board and management are pursuing, you would simply start the budgeting exercise as one other task that you have to do today, right? Or in your normal course of work. And a lot of the organizations that we have are still not able to flex, or it takes time to change direction. So the budgets themselves are already a reflection of how the organization operates. So there's a lot of historical costs, or a lot of what we did last year and adjust that happens in budgeting. So that's yes, it's a bit of a stifle innovation, because what you're doing is human nature is naturally resistant to change. And budgeting is really an expression of what we're going to do in the future. And therefore, if I have 10 people in my department, am I going to put a budget forward that says 8, right? Even though the organization has a cost efficiency exercise, and we say we're going to put a new IT system in place. I have yet to see a new IT system result in anybody saying in their budget for their department that they're going to reduce staff. When naturally one of the reasons you're doing it is to create efficiency due to IT improvement, or at least be able to deploy those resources elsewhere in the organization, and so on. But the no aspect is that the budget can actually be used as a tool to reflect the change. So by changing the benchmark, this is what the budget really is set a new benchmark. You can actually use the budget to communicate as part of the rollout of a new strategy what you expect people to do. So if you're saying, okay, I'm approving this expenditure next year to improve your accounting infrastructure or your sales infrastructure, right, architecture, and that means you're going to have less money for these other things, because we should not have 10 checks, manual checks, because now we can do one IT check because it's built into the system. So you can actually use the budget as a tool for achieving your future objectives if you actually have the courage to make changes within there and communicate that practically and get people engaged. Because just setting the budget is not going to do it. People are still going to, you need to implement what you put in the budget. So it has to be done jointly with real communication and execution.
Normally, the budget process starts probably 4 months before the end of the year. It is set, and innovative transactions, innovative thinking happens, you know, whenever, you know. So we are starting the process now for 2014, and we are in August 2014, and something comes up, and the CEO says, but is that in the budget? Isn't that a killer? I mean, the CEO, the CFO of the future, how would he deal with something like that?
Well, the two things that I would to elaborate on, and I think Ian is totally, absolutely right in the sense that, you know, you can take the budget as an instrument to really help to, you know, to tailor and to conduct the company, direct the company to you want to direct it. But getting to your point, I think that to me, the budget is kind of like a short-term plan within your strategic plan, right?
Beautiful.
Should always have to keep it in mind. So, and the challenge that I usually put to the CFO, and the way I like to do it is, my budget is always kind of a rolling, you know, a process. So, if we're done with the month of June of 2013, we already can have a good idea what can be, you know, June of 2014, right? So when you get into these cycles of planning, if you have this dynamic process, right, you already have your plan, you know, because you're always looking ahead, you're always ahead, right? So it's more an issue of fine-tuning more than start a process. I think that my humble opinion is that there's in many companies and many industries is this thing of, oh my God, here comes the planning cycle again. You know, this budget process is a pain, right? And you know, I have to present this to this XY person, and then they're gonna be, you know, this game of you know, exactly. So you put, you know, less revenue and more expenses because you know and it's kind of like it's like a game, right? More than being really a tool to
Achieve it.
you know, to really think strategically. It's a game. It is a game. So yeah, you know, that person, you know, the CEO of the corporation is gonna cut me here. So let's put bump the. Right, exactly. The famous sandbagging. And I think that's a mistake. I really think it's a mistake. When you really think as, you know, a true CFO, and you think on 5 years, 3 years, what have you, and you put that budget within that context, things are different. And the conversation, it's a different level, because if the whatever tells you, but you know, you are trying to spend more money, well, sir, let's look at, you know, what is the real objective? I mean, you want me to be number 2, you know, company in the industry. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to go there if I don't spend the money.
Beautiful. Because it is normally said that the budget, and you are mentioning a couple things there. You're talking about rolling budgets. You're talking about looking at budgets 3 years out, which is not the norm. Everybody look at annual budgets, but the budget is really one rung in that strategic staircase,
Right.
yeah, which will be
Right.
made up about probably 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different annual budgets.
Right.
You know, when you go out there and you plan strategy, and then you have the accountant, the CFO, the acclaimed CFO, who probably is a pseudo strategic thinker, you know, controlling the operations via this annual budget.
Right.
So isn't it a probability that the budget could be out of kilt with strategy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it happens a lot.
Yeah.
And then there's quote unquote CFOs that, you know, they love to be in control. So, you know, call us and say, you cannot spend $1 more here because you're over budget. And I mean, you know, I mean, you know, that kind of stuff. I mean, so I don't think that's the right approach. You know, I mean, but yes, you're right. I mean, it can be really if you don't have you know, a person with the right, you know, perspective. I mean, it's you know, a plan is a plan, right? It's not, you know, something that necessarily is going to happen. So the budget is nothing but a plan expressed in monetary terms.
Well, let me go to an old company that I used to work with, which I know they live by budgets. You know what I mean?
Wonder what company that is.
Yeah, so I agree. How would you deal with something like that as CFO of Scotia, where budgets are almost cast in concrete? How would you ensure that the strategy of Scotiabank for the next 5 years is pursued, as opposed to this command and control thing, which will ensure that probably you're probably a year or two behind where you should be in 5 years?
Yeah, I think it comes back down to the fact that the stakeholders in the budget process are more than one when you're in a multinational company.
Yeah.
So there is an element that is driven by the parent, and to the comments around the way that you do it. I mean, invariably, and the multinational goes through a process where you engage the business, you build this budget bottom up, you get to a number, you send it overseas, and the number that comes back is invariably different. You shove the difference in somewhere to make the budget, you know, align to that, and then you spend the year commenting against it because that's what they want to see. And you know, unfortunately, that's part of the game. I mean, my view of things, though, in terms of the way you manage the business is I'm very much a fan of the rolling forecast. I'm not a fan of the line-by-line control, because I think in today's environment, things change. So they ask, and you'd know this is well embedded in Scotia's culture, when someone comes and says, you know, I want to do something and it's out of budget, my invariable response is, so where's the offset? You need to find the offset. And again, I don't have a problem with spending more if you're going to earn more as a result of it. Because I think the thing that you're managing to is the bottom line, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I've got a profit after tax target that I'm going to nail, right? And I mean, to illustrate that point, let's think about, you know, the banking industry. Think about the external environment in Jamaica. Think about something like the NDX2 or NDX coming in, where the entire interest rate environment is restructured out under you. That's not an excuse not to nail your targets, right? You need to figure out how to make it. So I think the answer to your question is it's around flexibility. And while budget may be a necessity for your business, that's not the only way that you manage it. You do need to manage it flexibly off the forecasts. And I think what you're managing to is the bottom line at the end of the day. That's what you need to deliver against. That's what we get paid to do.
Yeah. Pete, let me just switch now to go to something a little softer. You know, where is that line, or where do you draw that line in terms of ethical considerations and maximization of shareholders' wealth? What do you expect from your CFO in that regard?
Well, I'm happy you brought that. I was listening to all the CFOs talking, and I was saying to myself, I have only heard of one stakeholder mentioned, that is the shareholder. And certainly there are other stakeholders. You have your staff, you have the community in which you live, well, meaning the organization lives. You have the taxman, you have the government, all of whom have an interest in the growth and survival of the organization. And that question of survival of the organization, I think, is, particularly in today's world, really, really, really important. And if it's one thing that I would like the CFO to do, is to make sure that he takes on board all of the varying interests to make sure that the organization survives. So the soft perspective for me would ensure that the long-term profitability is in fact achieved to the extent that the CFO takes on board all of the competing, or maybe seeks to make a collaboration out of the potential conflict from the various stakeholders, could ensure the long-term growth and survival of the organization, notwithstanding the changes that are going to take place along the way. But if it is that it's one against the other, you may make your budget this year, but maybe next year or next 5 years is the death of the organization, because the CFO he didn't listen to what the staff was saying, or he didn't listen to what the regulator was saying, and he concentrated on making the budget and killed his goodwill with a particular group. So the soft perspective is to make sure that the CFO is a good listener, and he's able to communicate properly what he has heard to the CEO and chairman and the board.
Well, the responsibility to the regulator, that could be legislated. You can't legislate things like ethics and integrity. You know, that comes from a place of doing right because it's right to do so. Yeah. But what I hear from you here is that you're talking about a kind of elusive thing that has been discussed time and time again, which is known as the triple bottom line. You know, the CFO trying to pursue corporate social responsibility as well as environmental issues as well as the bottom line. And can he be successful in all three? Miguel.
Well, it's a challenge, but I think, yeah, it's doable. Like in any other aspect in life, I think that there should be equilibrium. As long as, I think that as long as you don't put extreme emphasis on one thing and you ignore the other, I think that, yeah, it's achievable. I think that you can be a social responsible company while achieving, good results for the company. Absolutely. You look into what is needed in terms of environmental type of decisions. Yes, I think it's doable. Again, you've got to be careful, and it has to be part of your planning. If you plan correctly, you will be able to achieve correctly. Now, if you don't plan according to those objectives, then you're going to have a very difficult time doing that. But if setting the strategic goals, if those goals are part of your overall view, I think it's good. I think it's totally good.
Ian, do you think CSR, corporate social responsibility, and environmental goals are really part of a larger philanthropic deed or something like that? Yeah.
that, we force the green fund, right? By law, you have to put a portion of your income towards the green fund. So that's one thing that we've done here in Trinidad. But could we also, if we were to say, okay, you can voluntarily contribute, how much contribution do you get to the green fund, right? So there's still a way to go, but ultimately, I think it has to align to just in a society, because shareholders are part of the society, and how closely are they aligned.
Do you not believe that contributions to CSR objectives and environmental objectives is really payment, good payment, because it creates good business?
It's part of the business.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ignore that, I mean, I think you're going to lose touch with almost all your stakeholders if you don't have a mindset in that regard. And it can't be the surface. I think more and more corporations, you see them getting the employees involved, you see them creating associations with like Habitat for Humanity and all these other entities. So it's not only just giving a check. They're looking to really identify themselves to certain causes and align your investment. So if you stop talking about, well, how much money you're going to give away this year, you see what's our investment in these initiatives. I mean, Scotia has breast cancer, CIBC is looking at education, Trust has education as well. So all these organizations have pretty much picked their horses and I mean, Republic Bank also has cancer. So these things are getting to be very much part of the DNA of not only the organization itself, but the people who interface with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'd add to that because, I mean, I know the concept of the triple bottom line, but I mean, I view it as something that needs to quite simply be integrated, right? I mean, it's part of that bottom line in the same way that the salaries is, and in the same way that your salaries and you pay your team, you pay employees. There is an investment in it, right? And that's the other concept Ian raised, right? It's about investment, and the concept's value, not cost, right? It brings value to the business. It's an essential part of the business's agenda. We have to view it that way, and we have to integrate it into the way that we do it. There's no question. I think it's an imperative in today's world.
Yeah. Do you believe that that is a waste? There's wastage there, or like Ian, you need to pick your horses?
I think it's all about shaping it, and I think that the past few years has made anybody with that kind of an element of a budget be very efficient about it, right? Everyone, the cost imperatives of our current environment have driven that you need to invest wisely. You tend to pick themes, the scattergun approach of $500 here, $500 there doesn't happen. The big organizations pick big initiatives and partner in executing them. That's the way that it's happening, and that's good for, I think, everyone.
Is the CFO the next best CEO in your view?
That one's difficult, right? I think that it creates a good platform, but I think that there are other characteristics that go into that, and I think one of them really is to really truly be a good CEO, to be an outstanding CEO. You've got to have what I think I call desire, right? The way that a CFO who's effective shapes the agenda across the executive team requires them to kind of subliminate that desire a little bit. And I think that for me is probably an element of the hardest transition. You have to really want it. You have to want to make that difference. You have to want to drive that difference. And at times you have to, as a CEO, the buck stops here. You have to make the call. But truly effective CFOs today and tomorrow have to be a lot more integrative and working with a team and a team environment, and I think it dulls the edge a little bit. So it boils down to the individual and that little piece of things for me. That's the difference between a successful transition to CEO for a CFO.
Keith, what's your view?
Well, it depends on the situation of the company. I will say back in 2008 when everything was falling apart and you needed someone to hold things together and to cut costs and to make sure the organization survived. In that environment, I am sure that a strong CEO, a CFO, would have been a shoo-in to make the cut for the CEO. But when you were in
So before you go on, I mean, hold on.